I was saying this to my buddy the other day. We're talking about first round of the NBA and how powerful NFL is. I think that like if any of those first round games match up against night one of the NFL draft, the draft is going to destroy it.
So yeah,
Like, and we're talking about the draft. We're not even talking about
yeah,
games, right?
I've heard Bruce Nolan say this like four or five times that like more people watch the NFL draft than watch the NBA finals. Like it's crazy. So
Yeah. So it's round one, so there's really nothing to watch. And but in the point of the draft, I understand why draft season is so long and why the content is so vast. Like people are so interested in mocks, and I'm culprit of it. I do it. I do tons of
dude,
mocks for
I know, right? It's like
but it's so much though, Chris. Like it really is. I'm like over even my own opinions. I'm kind of over everybody's opinions on these guys and the prospects. We're all most likely wrong. 85% of the stuff that's been talked about is probably inaccurate or wrong or whatever. I'm just ready for it to get here and find out who's going to be
yeah,
winning
for sure.
and start to project how these players are going to turn
It's
out.
so funny because it's like, yeah, I'm so sick of mocks. I'm so sick of this. And then I'm like on my phone doing another mock. And it's like, I mean, at least now I've
We have a
switched
whole
from
week. What else are we going
yeah,
to do?
exactly. I've switched from Bills for a little bit and I'm doing Raiders mocks because of Greg's 32 GM draft that he's doing on YouTube tonight. And
I have a juicy trade for for tonight already in place.
yeah, yeah, I've got a couple I don't know how juicy, but it is, it's been kind of fun, man. Like all week we've been kind of going back and forth with people talking about different trades. It's just a different sort of approach. I think that like if you are into mock drafts, this will be a kind of an interesting one because instead of, one person against the computer, it's, 32 humans each controlling one of the teams. So I'm really curious to see how it turns out. Thomas, you've got Denver.
I was going to say, who are you, Thomas?
Yeah, I do. I have the Denver
I-
Broncos.
Is it a little Jerry Judy
I'm
action?
sorry. I'm sorry.
I don't know. Maybe I traded Russell Wilson. Not
Right.
sure.
Traded if you traded Russell Wilson to the Jets, I don't know how I'm gonna feel about that. Probably like it's like, but wait, maybe it's like that kombucha gif, right? Because it's like, oh, it's Russell Wilson, but is it Russell Wilson? It's actually Russell Wilson. It's not like he's been looking good.
Mr.
Uh,
Unlimited.
Not to derail too much, but in talking about the draft and trades and such, um, a couple trades that have sort of been rumored. Obviously, the Aaron Rodgers one has been all but delivered, has been what's told to us, but then it has been kind of stagnated, right? Like he came out on McAfee, talked about it, and then the deal seemed to sort of stagnate. We're assuming maybe the draft picks up for that. Maybe the draft picks up for movement on DeAndre Hopkins. Maybe Jerry Judy, to your point, Chris, in the mock world, maybe there is some actual value that gets presented during the draft to get some of these guys to move. Who do you think is the most likely, and do you think we see multiple moves here this draft coming up?
Well, I mean, certainly multiple moves. If you're talking about multiple player moves, I'd say probably. But yes, certainly there'll be a bunch, there's always all kinds of pick trades and stuff.
No, I'm talking specifically uh, veteran players
Yeah,
moving.
yeah. So, um, I mean, Hopkins seems pretty likely to me. I don't think Arizona wants to pay him, and I'm pretty sure they don't want to cut him and get nothing. But it's just a matter of like how far does it go before they bring the price down and or someone else feels like, okay, we didn't get the receiver we wanted in round three, so like no, we're willing to pay more to, bring DeAndre Hopkins in or whatever the calculus is. But yeah, I've been gaming out um like hypothetical trades for this special that we're doing tomorrow on cover on the YouTube channel that, talking about like, realistic trade scenarios or semi-realistic, I guess, but one of them involves Jerry
So did you
Judy.
trade Greg? Did you trade Greg Hunter Renfro from the Raiders or no?
No. No, I didn't. Well, not yet.
No.
Nothing's happened yet.
You don't want Ed Oliver for the Raiders? Can I sell you on the net dollar?
I mean, so nothing's official until the draft room opens like 10 minutes before we go live tonight. There are rumblings that people are on the move, and I don't know how Greg would feel if I said too much, so I'll leave it for
Okay.
but yeah, for the special I'm talking about tomorrow with the draft pick trades, there's one that I like gamed out for Jerry Jeudy that I thought made sense.
Yeah.
You know,
How about you, Thomas? There. What do you think on? Is there going to be a multiple players moved? Is anyone going to move? Is this Aaron Rodgers thing going to come to fruition here next week with the draft? What's up?
In terms of DeAndre Hopkins, I think I follow along or subscribe to Chris's idea. I don't know if it necessarily has to wait till the third or fourth round. I think it could be something to the scenario like with the Bills, where if let's say maybe they have their eye, because DeAndre Hopkins he's not that equivocated to like a fifth round receiver, right? Like he's going to be a guy that's going to put you over the top, and I think that type of level, you're talking JSN, Zay Flowers, Addison, maybe Quentin Johnston, like that type of echelon of a player. So I feel like if you miss out on that, that's when the lever gets pulled and you call Arizona and say, okay, you know what, let's do a fifth round pick, and we swap or split the salary. I think that's possible. I really do believe that DeAndre Hopkins will be traded, and I said it to Greg. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up in Buffalo. Gets him out of the conference, goes to somewhere that he wants to play. He does, the GM Monty Ford does right by DeAndre Hopkins, which as a new GM, I think is something that you should do. You should start off your tenure by making yourself look like you care about the players. It'll make your team more desirable going forward. Whether he actually knows that or actually subscribes to that idea is different. I think that's going to happen. I have this weird inclination that this whole Rodgers thing is going to fall apart and he doesn't end up going to the Jets.
yeah, it kind of feels that way, doesn't it?
It does. It just keeps dragging on further and further, and it's becoming to the point where you already had Rodgers, who really didn't. He didn't really seem all that like even when he was on Pat McAfee. Like it just kind of seemed tongue in cheek. It didn't seem like he was like overly over the top about the idea of going to the Jets or even playing. So I don't know. The whole thing just seems very, very odd to me. And
If a game show calls and
I
ask
would
him to
love it if
host,
they
he'll
don't do
do
it.
that before he plays for the Jets, probably.
Somebody said that, man. What if he just decides to go and be the host of Jeopardy instead of playing for the Jets? I think it'd be amazing.
I don't think Jeopardy wants
Yeah.
him, but maybe some like lower rent game show. But
Right. No, I think you'll see a bunch of trades. I think Jerry Jeudy will probably get traded as well. It's another GM just playing hardball right now. I mean, at a certain point, these general managers are going to sit there and say, we need assets back for these players. And if they're never going to re-sign Jerry Jeudy, his market is better right now than it probably will be next year. Because if he has a drop off, the quarterback hasn't, Russell Wilson doesn't play as well this year. There's so many variables, and I think he's going to get the best out of Jeudy right now than he probably would after next year, with little to no, with only 1 year of his contract left. So yeah, I think I could see a couple different trades. I think it's going to get really, really juicy towards like the latter end of the first round.
so I'm just joking when I say this, Thomas, but I thought it was funny that you're like, I don't know that DeAndre Hopkins is the equivalent of like a fifth round receiver, and then less than a minute later you're like, yeah, they'll trade him for a fifth round pick. But I know what you're saying. There's a salary involved. It's a whole thing.
Yeah, I think I think it is very, very intriguing as to what they think the compensation is. I know Brandon Beane's not going to bite on that. He's not going to get run through the mill by a new general manager. I think most general managers are probably going to be like, yeah, no, you're not going to rake us over the coals because you think you're trying to make yourself a name for your owner. But it'll be fun.
I think the problem is the Brandon Cooks deal is sort of already set, at least a bar that you have to stay within. I don't know that you can like go crazy above the value that was given there. It just doesn't seem like it makes sense. I wouldn't think Brandon Beane would be into something in terms of when you match up the analytics, when you match up the data, when you match up where they are in their careers. and then the value given for each player with those types of contracts and how the other team ate some money. It would be foolish for Brandon Beane to reset the market crazy.
Well, there's all these
To
different
your guys' point,
there's all these different. I mean, I know every player is different, but that Allen Robinson deal too. Like, what do you make of that? I mean, they moved up like 6 spots in the 7th round and paid $10 million to get him off their roster.
Yeah, I don't know. And to your guys' points here about when he gets traded or whatever, I think I'm going to split the difference between sort of where you guys are saying in that, like, yes, it is if you miss out on the high-end receivers, but he's really a 1 year, 2 year maybe patchwork idea. So even in those first 3 rounds, I still think it's probably a smarter investment in terms of like correct roster building to take a lottery ticket on one of those guys in the first 3 rounds working out than taking a 2-year flyer. Depending on what you have to pay for DeAndre Hopkins. But again, coming back to there's multiple ways to acquire these guys. But I think it's a mixture of, yes, if you miss out on those high end, but I don't think you necessarily have to wait till the 5th round. I think there's probably some guys in this draft you can get in the 2nd, 3rd round that would make you still feel okay. They're not going to give you the high end ceiling of a Hopkins, but I don't know that the Bills need that. They just need to continue to funnel good talent into this wide receiving core. If you can get a wide receiver too, fantastic. I'm not going to ever say no to that, but I don't know. There seems to be this like we have to get that top end guy or it's nothing. I think you just need to keep filling this room with talent.
I don't think you want to wait until the 5th round. If you're looking for a receiver, the cupboard's going to be kind of bare by then.
Right. And last night, actually, Zebot and Bruce Nolan and I, we did a mock draft, and we actually doubled down back-to-back picks. We went Parker Washington and Xavier Hutchinson, just because we said, you know what, let's try to see if we can hit, because the more opportunities, more lottery tickets you give yourself, the better opportunity you're going to have on potentially getting something worthwhile. So I agree. I mean, give us as many chances as we can. I think that's what the Deontay Hardy thing is. I think that's what the Sherfield thing is. And then getting another one in the room, maybe 2, you're giving yourself a chance to potentially not have to sign Gabe Davis to a $15 million per year contract.
2's too much for me. That's too much. I feel like 2 wide receivers.
Unless you're talking about like a late round flyer with the 6th round pick, maybe, or something like paired with 1 or 2. But I caught your mock last night, Thomas. That was a good one. If anyone hasn't seen it yet, that's on Cover One YouTube right now. Bruce and Zebot.
I'm gonna go get in the comments.
What a mix! Bruce and Zebot and Thomas. It was great though.
I'm gonna come to the comment section and tell you I don't want 2 receivers. No, yeah, it's a really weird draft. I agree with what Brandon Beane said this week in his press conference, where it seems like it's not real flush with the high end talent this year. If you're picking where the Bills are picking, you're probably taking a 2nd round talent, which I think is true most years. I think Bills fans have to start wrapping our heads around that a little bit more, picking here in the back in the 1st. Again, good probably spot for the Bills to be in where they don't need necessarily blue chip talent. They just need to keep filling in depth, but it's not as sexy. It's not as exciting when the 1st round isn't flush full of those guys, right?
It's not. And this is going to be the last time we're on Spaces in theory, unless we do an unscheduled one before the 1st round. So maybe we should make our the player we wish they will draft and the player we think they will draft. What do you think?
So I'm going to jump in. My hope is that next week we have traded back and have not made a pick. We all stayed up late, and the Bills traded back, and we are on the clock pretty early the next Friday night. And that would be a very exciting Spaces, because I think that we would be looking at linebacker and trying to address that.
I think I'd like to see them take a tackle, assuming one of the top 4 tackles falls, which we'll see. Predictively, I think it's going to be a receiver. I think it's going to be Addison if he's there. Addison, Flowers, maybe even Downs. I know you love Josh Downs, Thomas. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked to see a move like that.
Yeah, so for me, and I said this last night, and I keep wavering back and forth because I think there's such impactful pieces. I think a really nice wide receiver could really pay dividends on this offense. And then I think a guy like Jack Campbell could definitely help on this defense. I will say, I keep going back to what Sal Capaccio said, and I do think there's some level of credence to it. Is if you take a first round linebacker, what does that say about Terrell Bernard's pick last year? That's my little concern. Is not that I think that they would deviate from taking somebody just for the sake of protecting themselves from, asset management or making themselves look bad. But I think that's interesting. For me personally, I'd love to get my hands on Zay Flowers. I do love Josh Downs. I think Josh Downs has, I know some people are not as high on him. He's a little smaller. I think, man, what he brings to the table, his versatility in the slot. And I know people keep saying, well, hold on, I'm going to mute myself. There's a fire truck going right by my, I think I'm okay. The life of a mailman, you never know what's going to happen.
Al loves it.
So here's the thing. I don't necessarily care if Josh Downs is just a slot receiver. That doesn't bother me because when the Bills offense was at its best, it's when Cole Beasley was in slot and he was dynamic and he had free releases and he found the sticks and he gave Josh that security blanket that I think he so desired last year, but he didn't have. So for me, I don't care if he's just strictly a slot guy because I think Khalil Shakir can play on the boundary. I know people think that he's strictly slot. I don't necessarily subscribe to that idea. I think he can play both. I think a lot of the reason he didn't get a lot of run last year is he just didn't run the right routes. And I think he needs to get better and he needs to get more polished and learn how to be a more polished receiver. But I think getting a guy like Josh Downs, Zay Flowers, a guy that can create massive separation, is elusive with the ball in his hands, that's big. The other thing I would love, if Darnell Wright gets close, man, let's say you got Zay Flowers and Darnell Wright there together at the same time, I would be very hard pressed not to take Darnell Wright because I think going into this season, if you can solidify that right tackle position, because I don't want to go into the year hoping that Spencer Brown's back is better. I don't want to hope that he plays better. I want to know that we've got somebody that's going to protect Josh's UCL because look at what's going on with Brock Purdy right now could have very well happened to us. We got incredibly lucky, and I don't want to see that happen this year.
So you're not...
Anybody worried about Darnell Wright's work?
I was just going to say, Thomas, are you not worried
that
that he doesn't say big stretch anytime his dog stretches?
No, I'm not worried in the slightest bit. I think it's just another method to dragging a player down like Laramie Tunsil. They know that Darnell Wright's stock has been just booming since 2.5 weeks ago, and even a little bit before that. I mean, that's a Senior Bowl. He just kept his stock was rising, and it's just been rising ever since. I think it's a team saying, "Hey, can you do us a favor and put this stuff out there? Hopefully, we can get him to drop a little." It's not going to. Talent is talent, and a lot of times, I don't know who said it yesterday. Sometimes there's just guys that don't have to try that hard because they're just innately that talented, and they'll be that talented forever.
Yeah, but the Bills aren't. If the rumors are true, here's my only take to it, I guess, is that it was multiple reports. We don't know who these scouts are. Obviously, they're all kept anonymous, but it at least triggers a flag for me. And I think for probably most, if those scouts were reporting that, I'm assuming that everyone had a scout in the room saying something similar, and that it at least triggered a flag for teams to at least investigate it further to sort out for themselves. I don't know what the answers they came up with are, but I do know that the way the Bills speak, that could be a flag that is enough for them to be out on that. I think they would rather take a process guy over a higher talent guy. Brandon Beane sort of alluded to it the other day of guys that it won't work well with them. They're going to be out on those types of guys. And so I don't know if it is on Darnell Wright or not, but I will at least say that flags for me.
Yeah.
And this is a player I'm high on and probably one of the only guys I'm willing to trade up for.
It's a tiebreaker for sure. I think so. One of the things actually that came out of the mock that you did last night, Thomas, with Bruce and Zebot was this conversation about tackles and what side they have played on and what side you project them to, because it's maybe a little presumptuous to say that someone who played left tackle their entire college career can just move to right and be the same player. That's something to keep in mind, right? Because I mean, and I think that, I think it was Bruce who said this, was like, imagine like someone giving you a pen and telling you to write with your non-dominant hand. Like, it's just a different it's the opposite. I mean, these guys they're elite athletes. I'm sure they can relearn the technique and everything, but I don't know that you want to necessarily count on that happening right away, or count on it being the same, count on the ceiling being as high, if you're talking about switching them to another side. And it doesn't work. Like if you, excuse me, if you take someone who's been on the left the whole time, and then you talk about moving Dion to the right, I mean, it's the same thing. So that probably needs to be part of the conversation. Like if you're looking at a tackle and you will need a right tackle, you probably want to give the edge to someone who's played more on the right side, right?
Yeah, I think that's something that people need to like. If you ever watch offensive tackles and what they do, watch the very first step that they make. Okay, when they're on the left tackle, they literally lunge their front leg and they make a massive step. Watch a right tackle, they use the opposite leg. That's something that it's basically like inverting your brain. If you go from left tackle to right tackle, and we've seen this before, where people it just doesn't translate well, they have to completely reconfigure their mind as to which way they're not only moving, how their hands are going, which way their shoulders are moving, their hips, everything. It's not just as easy as, oh, you can just put them on the other side, everything will be the same. It's not. It's inverse. It's completely different for somebody, and in their mind, they have to reconfigure how they do things.
Yeah, but this isn't a new idea either. We've seen guys that were in college, even from tackle to guard. Again, a big switch. But I think that's the process you work out now. You work that out in these interviews, in those private workouts. You get an idea with your coaching staff, with your personnel department. Is this a gamble we can bet on? Like, do we feel comfortable that this guy's going to be able to make that transition? I think you can gather enough data to have a good guess. Although we missed on the Cody Ford experiment, so
Darnell Wright is
maybe
a
we don't
is a
have.
right tackle, by the way, and a couple other guys.
Yeah,
A couple other guys to keep an eye on: DeJuan Jones, and Wanya Morris, that both played primarily on the right side.
sure. But yeah, no, I think some of that stuff is good to talk about. I do think some of it's overstated, that like just because a guy hasn't shown doesn't mean that he can. I think you can gather some data on that. One thing here before we go too far that I did want to talk about, Thomas, you said Sal had mentioned if you draft a linebacker early, that's sort of an indictment on the Terrell Bernard pick. I don't know if that's totally true, because I don't know that when they picked Bernard that their plan was to lose Tremaine Edmonds. I really don't think that was actually the case, or the plan for Bernard wasn't to be the Tremaine Edmonds replacement. I think this is going to have to be sort of a pivot. And we're talking about, while it is like a decent investment as a third round pick, we're still talking about a third round pick, not like a first or second type of investment. It is something they can move on from, where I do think the Bills intended to keep Tremaine and have him be part of the future, and it just didn't work out. And now they're in a bit of a bind, but they have some young talent that they did have a good investment in. But I don't know that would be an indictment on that pick, or necessarily a waste of that pick, because I don't know that he was the plan to replace Tremaine in the first place.
I agree. There's probably an alternate opinion, and I think the one thing that's interesting is Brandon Beane in the press conference. He had mentioned, which I thought was kind of surprising, I guess, but maybe not in his mind, was that a second round pick is a guy that may not start the first year, might just kind of contribute, and then the next year maybe he'll get some more starting time. So he very much like the scaling. I think mentally a lot of us kind of sit there and say, well, first round pick, absolute starter. Second round pick, he should be starting, big contributor. Third round pick, maybe he'll get in here and there. And then everything after that's just kind of a work in progress. Brandon Beane, I think, thinks it as first round is absolute starter, and then after that, it's more of a question mark. So I think maybe we have to look at things differently.
To that point, Thomas, this is a point I've been dying to make since he said that, and I just haven't had a chance. I should have said it on our show. To this point, he also said, picking at 27, we're probably going to end up with a second round grade player. Should Bills fans curb their expectations about this first round pick, in being that typically we think first round picks should start and contribute right away? There was frustration that Kaiir Elam wasn't being
It's a great point,
asked to be a
Aaron.
starter earlier. if they're valuing these late round picks as second round grades, and they value second round grades as maybe our starters, but probably future starters, should we adjust our own expectations?
Yeah, it's a great point.
Yeah, I think that's something to be thoughtful about. And I think what we really have to start looking at is, and that's another thing Sal said, which I thought was interesting, is how far will they dig deep? Like, let's say Josh Downs, right, for reference point. Maybe they have a grade of Josh Downs and he's like 43rd. If they're picking 27, will they go to a guy that's 16 spots from what their valuation is? I don't know. But we might have to think that, let's say 5 receivers go, right? The top 5 go, and we're sitting there at 27. Do they go and say, maybe we need to take, if they can't, let's say they can't take a trade down, do they go Josh Downs if they believe he's the next best receiver? And they know that if they don't take him now, they're not going to get a wide receiver, because 59, and we saw this last year and the year before, the runner receivers could be detrimental to the Bills because of where they sit.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of guys that you can draft in like the second to fourth rounds, but you're right. It's like, the drop off depending on where they've got him. If they've got Downs pretty high, I could see them taking him at 27 and just saying, hey, we love his game. We think he can have a role in this offense, and for several years and maybe more. And it's worth it, So yeah, that wouldn't shock me.
And on that, Thomas, I agree with your point that there's some old ideas I think that still are lingering in the football world, that like one with nickel corner, that it's somehow like a lesser cornerback, and also a slot. Like this idea that you couldn't use a late first round pick on a guy that might primarily be a slot wide receiver, I think is kind of silly in today's NFL, because that's a huge position in a lot of these offenses, and clearly in the Bills. And so if it's a position you're targeting and have a use for, I don't understand where people say you can't like value that more, that somehow boundary is more valuable in modern NFL in certain offenses. I don't know. All that stuff just doesn't make sense to me. It seems like it's old ideas, and people are the same way when it comes to nickel corner, right? Like it's just an overall sort of undervalued position that is actually sort of a Swiss Army specialized position in the modern NFL.
Yeah, and then you get like, well, you can't take Josh Downs at 27 because he's always there in the second round. Well, is he there at 59? Right? Like, that's to Thomas's point.
And we're probably taking a second round value guy. Like,
Yep.
We just have to get there mentally.
And the I forget who brought this up first, but the difference between, the guys who are behind those first round grades, like however many there are, like let's say 15 to 20, like the guys from like 20 to 60 or so, closer than it may look, if you're looking at a draft board. Like obviously someone who's at 60 looks like they're 3 times down the list from 20 or whatever, but it's really not that big of a difference in terms of their talent. So you could see, and we see it every year, I feel like, where people get taken at spots that the media and fans are like, that doesn't make sense based on what I was looking at pre-draft. But you got to remember that teams evaluate players differently. They have different systems, different roles for these players. So they might have Josh Downs with a first round grade. I mean, there could be teams out there who want that guy enough that they would be happy to spend a first round pick on him.
And to your point, Aaron, in regards, and Chris, what you're just saying, a guy like Darnell Wright, you might be right, may not fit what they're looking at between the ears, right? And I think that's something else. There is a laundry list. Like if you put together an Excel chart, and man, that'd be something crazy to even think about, but of different things that you have to look at as a general manager, but even more so as a Bills general manager, there's absolutely a style of person, not player, person, that they want. And I think that also comes into play. Like when you're looking at who's available on a day-to-day basis, like last night we were talking about, because Brian Bresee fell to us at 27. And Bruce and I immediately, that was our first thought, Brian Bresee. He is absolutely the type of player that the Bills would take. Went through serious tragedy last year, played through the adversity, really showed his true colors, has been a workhorse for Clemson. Like that would be a guy that I think that they would go after, a guy that's kind of tradesy, real big, could fit a position of need, probably value-wise is right there. I think we need to start looking at things differently in a scope of the Bills might be different from most NFL franchises and what they want and how they perceive value.
I agree completely. Hi, guys. By the way, I'm late to this. I
What's up,
know.
Joe?
Finally in the office. Annoying morning. Yeah, to chime off everybody's point, and I think this is something that draft season should, always be a reminder of, and I hope that this is something that, if it's people that are new to it or just people that have been through the block with how draft goes every year, that a lesson to be learned is value is relative. The value you see is relative to people that aren't speaking on behalf of a specific organization. They're speaking on behalf of what they've seen on film, what they've watched, what they think is the best pick, right? Which, of course, that makes sense. If you see someone on film looking incredible, talented, whether that's a Bijan Robinson, whether that's Darnell Wright, any of these top prospects, then of course they're going to get high value and they deserve it. They play well. They obviously could fit a team well. But at the same time, when we talk about the draft, I think it's safe to say that a lot of the people in this space and the people at Cover One and everything, we're talking about the Bills, and therefore the value, like you guys have all said, should be Bill centric, not NFL centric. Like when we're talking about picking at 27, first off, the lines are absolutely muddy. You are not talking about a guaranteed top 15 talent. You are talking about someone that could very well be a second round talent. But guess what? That second round evaluation is from scouts. It's from non-Bill specific people, and on the Bills board it's okay, maybe they are a second round projection. However, this is a major need we have. This is something that we would like to fill with someone that we think is capable of filling it and filling it well. Why are we going to hesitate on taking this pick if it's right there in front of us? Which is why when I see people say something along the lines of like, oh, Josh Downs would be a reach, Jack Campbell would be a reach, blah 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 would be a reach, it's not a reach if it's a need. Now, granted, I think there are better players than others in the draft, obviously, when you're talking about, well, should we take this guy who could fit the slot at 27, who was a second round projection versus a seventh? Then, yeah, I would prefer to get the guy who's had more people tell me that he's going to be a higher caliber player in the NFL, that he's projected to do better, that people have loved him more than X prospect in comparison. But at the same time, when you're picking at that level, you're picking for a need. You're in the end of the first round, which indicates, one, that you're a good enough team, assuming you didn't trade, to have too many pressing needs, and two, that you're not going to get a top 15 player, barring some incident that lets that player drop. So to me, rather than focusing so hard on, oh, we're at 27, we have to wait to get this guy, or this guy is a second round, mid round guy, let's wait for him. It's no. I think if this is a need and there is a second round talent there that fills that need and fills it well, and now because we're using a first round pick on him, we can get a fifth year if he contributes, then we should do it. And if that's Josh Downs, if that's DeJuan Jones, if that's Jack Campbell, Trenton Simpson, you name the guy, I'm all for it, and I could completely understand it. Is my first reaction that we should stay at 27 if we think we can trade down and still get someone we want? No, I would like to trade down, but that's obviously if another team wants to trade up. So therefore, I would be happy to stay at 27 and take that quote-unquote reach if it means this guy's coming in and filling a need right away. And if that's Josh Downs, I'd be ecstatic because I love Josh Downs.
Selfishly, I hope they don't trade down because I'm going to be on the 10 to 11 slot for our draft coverage, and I have to work first thing in the morning. So if I'm staying up to 11 o'clock and they trade out just after I'm sitting there, I'm going to be very disappointed.
What
But
if
I
they
also be
pick,
very
what if they
excited.
pick after you sit there, after you're sitting there?
Yeah, that'll be brutal.
But like to your point about people, the personalities, like that's something. I mean, that's great, and it's something that we don't see in the pre-draft process as much. I mean, teams get to meet with these guys, and it's like you saw with Kyrie Elam last year, right? People were kind of like mixed on the pick, and maybe they liked another corner better because they were projected higher or whatever, and they had a better RAS. I'm not sure, but the embedded video that came out that showed how much he clicked with Sean McDermott and the coaching staff, and there's just another element there that's behind the scenes that you just have to keep in mind. There's so much that we just don't really understand about or don't really know about what's going on at this point in the process.
I think that's a great point, Chris. And to add to that point, I think there's been a lot of confusion since Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane arrived. I've been really, I'm not saying anyone here is saying this, but I've been battling it with even just the trust the process ideas and culture, and the conversation about culture and the type of guys they're looking for. I think people subscribe to that they just want Trent Murphys and choir boys. And I know a lot of people joke around about like, oh, they have to be religious and a wrestler and all these things that Sean McDermott looks for in people. But we also know Brandon Beane legitimately tried to acquire Antonio Brown, right? Like Stephon Diggs has been a great teammate here, but he had a bad rep. They've gone after OBJ. They were all in on that. And so I think there is some rumors or ideas about what the Bills value that maybe aren't true, and maybe some things like I said that Darnell Wright stuff might be a red flag. I think they probably indicated it, but I think they might look at it and maybe they find out that hey, they weren't getting the right things out of him in that program. We feel like he could be the best version of himself here. But it seems like they have a loose idea in terms of the type of character. I think it's more about how do you prepare yourself? How do you approach the game? Like, are you committed to the team? Stuff like that matters to them more than is this guy a diva or is there some extra stuff that comes along with it? Because they've been in on some of these guys.
Yeah, and not everybody clicks with everybody else, right? I mean, you might have two people that you're really close with and they hate each other. I mean, it's just everyone's got different personality. Just because one GM thinks that a player doesn't have the right work ethic or, doesn't have the right attitude, doesn't mean that another GM wouldn't think that they have exactly the right, work ethic. It could be a matter of it was a bad meeting for whatever reason, and I don't know.
Uh, I will give a case in point. Eric Turner interviewed Olawatimi at the Senior Bowl, and he didn't look great. I won't lie. In that interview, he seemed kind of just put off by being interviewed. Didn't really have time for it. I was turned off by it a little bit. I could see how, if presented that type of attitude in a sit down, there could be a GM that says, "Look, that plays great. He looks like a good player, but." Like, I don't want to be in a room with this kid every day. Like, he just doesn't have that attitude that meshes. He's not what we're looking for. He doesn't have that DNA. Like, so I can see where those types of, whether it's a personality trait or things like that, that it's just hey, this guy isn't our style. It doesn't match what we're building in our building.
Well, that
And not
reminds
only,
a lot of discourse on James Cook last year. I mean, he got picked and you saw his reaction and he didn't smile and he wasn't jumping around the room. Everyone was like, oh, this dude doesn't want to go to Buffalo. He's going to hate Buffalo. And it's like, nah, man, some people are just not extroverts. Some people just don't smile that much. Like,
That he didn't smile thing drove me nuts.
it's
Like, it really got me
ridiculous.
mad.
So dumb.
and it
It's
got
So
even
dumb.
worse because that's not the first time that Bills fans did this. They did the same thing with Stephon Gilmore when he was drafted. Literally, the guy was stonewall,
Granted,
very no
same month of
emotion.
year.
Yes, I want to say this because, again, we're fans. Fans love their team. When you love anything, insecurity arises, right? That's just being human. And when you love your team, you're insecure about your team. It's the reason why you go around and defend it. Because if someone slanders Josh Allen, of course we're going to want to put people in their place because that's our team. You don't fuck with our team. So when a player gets drafted and a player's not jumping around the room, the first thought for a lot of people, again, this is not everybody, but there are plenty of people who will say, oh, I don't like that attitude. I don't like that look. You don't know this man. You've never met James Cook. You never met any player that doesn't smile when they get drafted. It's a lot to take in. It's a life-changing situation, not just a big one, a life-changing situation. James Cook now had to move across the country to a place he's never been to in his life, except for maybe a pre-draft visit. He's going to be away from his family. He's going to be playing with people he's never played with before. It is a massive transition in life. And so many people in their day-to-day lives, and again, I'm not trying to speak for everybody, but not everyone moves across the country for work. Not everyone has to make this dramatic life shift all in a day's notice. He had no idea where he was going to, and even if it wasn't where he wanted to go initially, that doesn't matter. He's going to play here. He's going to meet people. It's going to take time to transition, and that's exactly what happened. And now
Well, it came out too that he was on the phone with the Bills, I think, when that camera cut on, and he was trying to hear, and there were just so many people there to, support him on draft night that he couldn't hear on the
He's also
phone, and he
just
was
on the
getting
smile.
frustrated.
Yeah, it's I'm talking to my employer. If I had gotten hired by my current job and my whole family was screaming, and I love my family to death, but I'd be like, guys, please stop. I'm trying to hear this. And that's just kind of what I want to make this point about is if the player isn't jumping around the player, basically just don't project on the player. We don't know them. We've never met them. Have a first-hand account. It's a different story. And even then, there might be some context missing. But they're people too. They're human too. They might not project emotion the same way as you do, and that's okay. They're still here.
Let's
Still love Buffalo.
Let's be honest too. We all spend probably too much time on Twitter, and it's where all the people that are just never going to be happy, unless like a draft pick comes out and he's like, "Fuck yeah, Bills Mafia, ranch sucks." Like then they'll finally be happy. But other than that, there's like nothing some of these guys can do. Like the people that even get mad about that stuff, like they'll do the rookie interviews and they'll be like, "No, I like chicken tenders or whatever," and people are like, "Oh, this fucking guy, we got to teach him."
I love chicken tenders. I fucking
Yeah.
love chicken tenders, man.
Dude, if anyone tells me they don't like chicken tenders, I'm gonna have some serious questions. Like,
But it's the same thing. Like if you're just not happy enough to be a Bill, it's the same people that just like we got to put Fred Jackson on the wall. It's like it's a business, right? These guys, they're gonna give us their best effort. They're gonna show up. They're gonna be happy to be here. You know what I mean? They just don't project it that they need to be the fan that you are of the team.
Yeah,
I
and I
mean,
think to your point, I think the big part about all this is that the expectations amongst who we want are always sky high. And it's not just mutually exclusive to Bills fans. It's across
No.
the NFL. We all since the end of last season, and even before that, because you watch the NFL or the college season and you start kind of thinking about who might look best in a Bills uniform come the next year's draft. So there are fans that sit there and say, man, I want to get my hands, on JSN, or I want to get my hands on Peter Skoronsky, or I want to get my hands on Parker Washington, or whomever you desire, right? There
Thomas
are
loves
people that
touching
will sit
football
there.
players.
Yes. Yes. You nailed it. Uh, the fact that people really want to sit here and focus on this for months, it's going to be hard for them to deviate their minds. And then emotionally, it all comes to a fever pitch at the draft, especially if it's not who they like. It doesn't fit what they think that was going to happen. Or if it's just a player that, somebody perceives is not a need. I think no matter what, you're never going to find Bills fans or any fan completely and unanimously happy. What we need to do, we need to go into this draft with the expectation that we have to be open and willing for these guys to be something. No one knew who Matt Milano was. No one expected Matt Milano because Matt Milano is probably going to end up on the Wall of Fame one day. He's that damn good. Um, he is one of the greatest Bills players to ever suit up, and I don't think that's hyperbolic to say at this point. No one knew who he was. Very few people knew who he was coming out of BC. Now what? I think we need to have our expectations tempered and expect that, there are going to be picks that we don't know, we don't understand, we don't visualize as to why they're going to fit into this team. But there's a lot that can become of what they are.
Yeah, it's a situation where you are not in the war room with them, right? When they picked Terrell Bernard, for me, I was definitely taken back by it. I thought there were other needs. However, I imagined when it was picked that there was a plan that I just didn't think of, that maybe there is a valid reason. And maybe this year, again, like whether you have your agreement or disagreement on the future of Terrell Bernard, I could see a role for him, even with the current linebacker room, even if they pick one. And again, it's just we are not in that room with them. We don't know what their trend or plan or whatever they had in mind is. If they pick a safety in round one, and I personally don't want that. However, if they were to, I would at least just try to see the logic in the situation before I'm, go crazy and see red about it, because obviously there's something of value there where they feel it's necessary to take the pick that high. And just, we can't predict anything. Every mock draft is mostly wrong. Right? Like, yeah, you might hit on one or two here or there, but if you're telling me you're going to guess every single pick for all 7 rounds because you know what the Bills' needs are, I would laugh in your face. It's not going to happen. They're going to pick someone that you're not going to agree with. They're going to take a position you didn't think was a position of need because they have a long-term plan, safety or D-end or whatever it may be. That's going to happen. And if it does, just try to see why they would do it. See ahead, because not everything is for the immediate future. Sometimes you look at the 2-year plan. Sometimes you look at when the ex-player leaves, Hyde's on the last year of his contract. If they wanted to take a premier safety because they felt like Hyde isn't going to come back and they're worried about his neck, then I completely understand it. Maybe they have to shelf him for a year, but there's logic to it. So in this draft, there's going to be picks that you might not agree with, positions that be taken that you didn't think were needs. There is a plan there. They're not doing it just to go balls to the wall. There is a reason for it, and I hope people can see that.
I want to come back to the character thing for 1 second here, because I did read that article yesterday with the flags on Darnell Wright, and it, again, late in this process, sent me a little bit for a loop, because that's that guy that anyone that's team trade up, my trade up scenario is like once it approaches like that 24th, maybe coming up a little bit if he starts falling, but not if he's that red flag guy. But then I think back to some of the red flags on Ed Oliver and whatever you want to think about Ed Oliver as a player now and how he's worked out. The Bills were all in on him as a first round pick. So it makes me wonder if they take those types of flags as seriously as maybe I'm concerned of. What do you think on that?
I'm sorry, Aaron. Are you saying like can you just? I kind of trying to understand the point. What are you asking?
I'm saying I'm trying to figure out. We think of the Bills as this like disciplined, process-oriented team, and as I'm talking through it, I'm thinking of examples of in trying to acquire an Antonio Brown, trying to do these things, and even in the draft process, there was questions about Ed Oliver early. Like he was a consensus top 5 pick when that college football season started, and then you had a little bit of a dip in his production, and then you had the issue with the coat on the sideline, and there was some that he wasn't interviewing that great. And the Bills still invested highly in him. Are my screws a little loose in that I think of this as like a conservative team, and when I think of process, like hearing the concerns of Darnell Wright not being a hard worker, am I wrong for that to be such a red flag? I guess with all the other signs that show that the Bills are kind of willing to ignore some of that stuff.
I definitely don't think you're wrong to have concerns, right? Like there is absolutely a valid approach to kind of character in the draft, and I don't mean it like, oh, this person didn't recycle, they threw it in the trash, therefore they're a terrible person, let's pass up on them. I mean it more so like,
although you should recycle.
Of course, you should recycle. This is not an anti-recycling space. Please put your water bottles in the triangle blue bin, whatever. What I'm saying, though, is if someone has character concerns and enough people are telling you, it's not just one person's account. If you see maybe a bunch of scouts have all said the same thing, then I think you have the right to be skeptical. Not to automatically judge the person, but to be skeptical of this person and to say, okay, I've had like 6 scouts tell me that, this guy doesn't really have a great work ethic. He's been known to slack off. Like, let's keep that in mind when we interview him, and then let's see for ourselves. If you do that and you go into an interview with this person and that person kind of continues that trend in your eyes where you see it as like, all right, they're being super, like we're just given this impression that this isn't, because it is an interview, right? You have to leave a good impression. That's any interview you do. But in the case of a player, if they kind of continue that trend in your mind where it's like, all right, we can see them not being a hard worker on this team, maybe there's some red flags in the interview process, then I don't think it's outlandish to say, okay, that's too much of a concern. We'd rather trend to someone else who might show us a little more in the interview, who might give us more reason to believe that they're going to bust their ass when they get to this team. However, I also think if we're talking about claims about, let's say Darnell Wright's character that might be unfounded, or there isn't enough out there for me to truly believe that this guy has character concerns and he knocks my socks off in an interview, or at least shows me like, okay, these people could be wrong and his talent is immeasurable, I'm still taking that guy. I think, like, again, people are human. People will make mistakes. Like Darnell Wright was wrong for making the mistake of messaging that reporter, telling him to, expletive, even though I've already cursed on this space, but still, I think we all remember that message. But I didn't think Darnell Wright's draft stock should fall because of that. I think he was probably reacting emotionally, said something bad, and guess what? He apologized. Now, if Darnell Wright goes into a pre-draft interview and nails it, he's probably still going to get taken top 10 by a team that values that position and needs it. So I think it's not wrong to approach a draft pick or to approach someone and say, I want to see someone, have a good attitude, show me that they got a good work ethic, because it's the NFL. You need to have both of those things if you want to succeed. And, just indicate to me that the pick we're going to use on you is worth it. But I also don't think that someone having minor character concerns is enough of a draw to avoid them entirely. I think there are, there's a spectrum here where you could range it from like, is this a minor thing or is this person genuinely an awful human being that we don't want?
The reporter thing, actually, for me, this is make me a terrible person that it made his draft stock tick up just a slight bit for me. Also, when Laramie Tunzel, the grass mask pick came out, I wanted him more. When everybody else was like, oh, no, he's going to drop. I was like, this is my guy. Like, let's go get that guy. But I have different value set, obviously, than NFL teams.
Laramie Tunzel celebrating Christmas yesterday.
That's right. I still couldn't believe that everybody cared that much. Talking about like how weird the NFL can be and some of these things that are valued. Like when he was dropping, blew my mind over a silly picture of a college kid smoking some weed. Like you don't think that 80% of that the league was already doing it at the time.
I think it
It
was
was
the
just such a
imagery of the gas mask, honestly.
Wouldn't that be good though? Like the gas mask, the guy doesn't waste. He's keeping all the smoke inside. He's utilizing
Yeah,
all of the marijuana to his disposal. I mean,
it's
that's a guy
efficient.
that is dollar like dollar thoughtful. I think that's important.
it was just weird to me. Like people weren't in their
Oh god.
20s at any point. I don't know.
What year was
Weird
he
stuff.
drafted again?
Oh
Was it-
man, it was
16.
oh
It was 16, I think.
something.
Yeah, 16.
16?
Pretty sure, yeah, because that was the Shaq Lawson year, if I remember correctly.
Laramie,
I'm curious how
Tunzel,
many states had
Lawson,
legalized recreational weed by that point.
It was just Colorado and California.
I'd be an awful GM because if you told me some
yeah, it
prospect
was
in the
2016.
draft came out and there was a story about how they did acid and frolicked in a park all day, I'd be like, yo, that dude's sick. Let's take him.
Yeah, I don't care. I don't care about any of it. The character issues I care about are like, is this person have like criminal behavior or a tendency to do things that are like really gonna bring problems? So let's see. Yeah, he didn't fall that far actually either. He fell to 13.
Which was a steal because now,
Yeah.
The other
Yeah,
thing we have to think about, which I think is important in this situation, it might be even more so nowadays, is that the first couple of years, I think they may have been a little bit more structurally sound as to the type of players because they wanted, to build this thing up. But now that Josh is where he's at, he's established, he is the leader. They've got a good framework of leaders in the room. They've got a bunch of veterans now. I think they can take more chances on guys that may have blemishes on their, in their character department than they may have the first couple of years because they know they've got a group of guys that can mitigate any issues that they may, run into along the season.
yeah,
No,
and you.
oh, I'm sorry, Chris. I was just going to say,
Yeah.
I got to go, but I'll see you guys later. Thanks for having me under review tomorrow at 11 a.m. Take care, boys.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, if you haven't checked out Joe's podcast under review on Cover One YouTube, there's a few episodes up there already, but he goes live on Saturday mornings at 11. They're gonna do another mock tomorrow with Kevin Masser and Mike Bunt, I believe. So yeah, that should be a lot of fun. Make sure you check that out. And it's Masseri. Damn it, Kevin Masseri.
Kevin Masseri.
Sorry, Kevin.
Yeah, come on, get it right. Pay the price.
I know.
I butcher everybody's names. Everyone gets so mad at me in the YouTube comments. I don't care.
AJ's laughing at me.
Yeah. All right, we got a little bit of time here left. Chris, you got anything you want to pump up here?
Yeah, so I mean, I mentioned Greg's 32 GM mock draft tonight. I'm really excited for that. I think it's going to be fun. Thomas and I are both a part of it, as well as Dom from the Cover One Slack. Judge Mathis is doing the Arizona team. There's going to be a bunch of. I think Judge is going to be on live with Greg too, and I might go on for a bit here and there. But that should be a lot of fun. Each team has a human GM controlling it, which kind of a different spin. Tomorrow, right after Joe DeRosa's show under review, we're gonna stay live on Cover One YouTube for a special on draft pick trades, specifically like the history of trades in the McBean era and how that compares to the past and all and looking at some realistic scenarios that like if you're doing mocks over this last week leading up to the draft and you want to try to throw in some things that make sense because the value is equal on each side like that should be pretty fun. And then on tomorrow night, actually it's kind of a busy couple of days here for me, but we're going to be on playback tomorrow night. Myself, Greg Tonsett, and Anthony Prohaska, we're all going to be hanging out, watching the Bandits game actually, and talking Bills draft and watching clips from draft day with Kevin Costner. And it's actually kind of hilarious. They're playing the Toronto Rock, which is a great name for a team. first of all, but the last time these two teams played, it took them almost 10 minutes to finish the last 12 seconds of the game because the teams would not stop fighting each other. It was ridiculous. And Thomas, I know that you're kind of into lacrosse, but like it reminded me of like it made me think that lacrosse is sort of the bastard child of hockey and wrestling. I don't know if that reads accurately in your mind, but they're talking to like the refs don't even step in to break up the fights until after there's a takedown. And they call it a take, like it's actually it was hilarious. If that might be normal, and if you guys are like are big lacrosse guys and you're listening, you're like, wow, this guy's never watched lacrosse before. You're right, but that's but it's a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it.
I've heard Bandits games are a ton of fun. It's actually one of the few Buffalo things that I haven't done yet. I do want to do it, but they're a little late for my kids, and I do want to get my kids there. But I heard it's a whole fun family activity to do,
And they're
that it's a
good too.
relatively
They're
new
going to the
game.
playoffs, which start. This is the second last game of the regular season tomorrow. But yeah, they're number one. They'll finish number one or number two in the East, and they'll have some postseason.
So a better use of time than the Buffalo hockey team.
Well, it depends on
I'm
how
not
you.
scared to say it. I'll say it to everybody.
I mean, I don't know, man.
It's
it
a better
depends.
return on investment. Better return on investment.
If you rate your like sports watching by like will the team make a run this year, then okay, sure. But
Yes,
if you have a longer timeline in mind and you're looking ahead to like next year, this is the Sabres are on a trajectory. They're on a path, and it ends in the playoffs next year.
Chris, I'm sure that's more true than it's ever been. I have been attacked by Sabres fans for years. I can't tell you how many times Sabres fans showed up at coaching changes, Bills changes, that telling me that the Sabres are ahead of the Bills and the Sabres are going to be better soon and just next year, and showing me all the metrics that if they just increase this, it's going to be better. If we just get the goalie sticks, whatever it is.
Yeah, get better sticks.
I'm excited for you guys that you're excited. But you're not going to sell me on it. You're not going to sell me on excitement for Buffalo hockey until I see playoff hockey. I've heard Buffalo playoff hockey is the coolest thing, and I've lived here for over a decade. I've never seen it. I would like to see it.
It's fun. It's fun when they're good, and they're good right now. Even though they didn't make the playoffs this year, they fell 2 points, one game short of it. They're a good team, and they're getting better. They're getting younger.
I will say the local vibe from people has felt more encouraged than at any point in living here. That outside of like the immediate when they got Jack Eichel, everyone was real happy. That kind of died out pretty quick. People seem more encouraged, to your point, about the next year or two than I've seen in a long time.
I can't believe we're talking about the Sabres right now.
It's your fault. It's your fault. I'm done with the draft. I'm ready to come on here next week and talk about who they either got or maybe who they're looking for on night 2. But I'm done talking. I'm ready to be done with mocks, done projecting. I want to know who the Bills are going to have. Either way, here to end this conversation, one thing I wanted to ask when we had more people on the panel, but I'll ask you and Thomas here while we're here.
Maybe AJ wants to jump in. I see him listening.
AJ, if you want to jump in here, we can get you an invite here. I only got about 10 minutes, and I got to bounce. Actually 9 now. But to this point of back to, hey, we're probably getting a second round value guy. Beane is saying that second round value does not necessarily mean we think this person is going to start day one. In that idea that maybe they don't land a guy that is a position of need where there is a starting position open, if we're curbing our expectations for that, how do you feel about this Buffalo Bills team with no further changes to it? Because I think this is like a 13-win team still. I hate to do projections. I'm not going to do a schedule projection, but just in general, I still think on paper, as is, without any draft picks, this team is top of the division, 13-win football team.
Well, I mean, based on what happened last year, right? If we look at last year as a sample, and they've only added, and I think they've improved in certain areas. The wide receiver group, I truly believe they've improved. They've brought in Taylor Rapp. I think that's an improvement. Linebacker is still work in progress. Defensive line, they brought back the same group. Running back, I think they improved. They've done some things to improve on last season, and the one thing that out of the gate I would hope that would improve is not having all those cataclysmic events that happened last year, along with the litany of injuries that we ran into. I think this team should be at least to where they were last year. And I truly believe that the only thing that really ever held them back from getting past that point is was what was in front of them, which was themselves. I believe this team is 100% Super Bowl champions. I think they have every ounce of the ability to do so. They have a very talented roster on every facet. Like if you look at every group, every position group, they either have an all-star or a very good talent at that position. And not too many teams can say that. And I think that's important. And I think where they're trending, they're in a good place. They can add some nice pieces to fill in the depth or the gaps, or maybe improve even more on some certain areas like wide receiver, defensive end, defensive line. So I'm incredibly excited as to where they are. I agree, Aaron. I think they're at least a 13-win team. And everyone says that it's, maybe the window's shutting on the AFC East. Aaron Rodgers isn't in the Jets locker room right now, and I don't even know if he will. Tua Tagovailoa has to stay healthy, and after the press conference where he almost considered retirement, I think he's one solid hit away from being there. And then the Patriots, we've already seen with all the mess they have between Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi, who knows what their quarterback situation is. I think there is no time like the present for the Bills to capitalize, and they've got almost the same roster plus improvements.
Yeah, I'll follow up with that. I think, I mean, they could win 13 games, and I think it's, there's a chance they do that. I think, with their schedule this year, I think that's, it's a tougher schedule. I think their focus should be winning the division first. I think the division got better, and that's just, the Jets are going to get Rodgers most likely. The Dolphins. The only thing that worries me with them is Tua, like Thomas said. But yeah, you look at the roster in total without DeAndre Hopkins or another receiver or a right tackle. I think they're still one of the top rosters in this league on paper. And you look at Von Miller's coming back, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer are returning. Trey White coming off an ACL injury will have a whole offseason to develop and get his game to the level where he has had it in years past. Christian Benford getting another year. Bringing Dane Jackson back, I think, is important. Kyrie Elam. That whole defense, besides losing Tremaine Edmonds, hopefully can take a step forward this year. I know it's hard because they're already elite. And then if you look at the offensive side of the ball, you upgraded the Jake Kumar position. You upgraded the Isaiah McKenzie position as long as he can stay healthy. And then I think Damian Harris is a running back that they've never really had in the McBean era. And then you add James Cook to that with a rejuvenated interior offensive line, probably some competition in the draft at right tackle. You can make an argument that this team is better than it was than it was 2 months ago on paper. So I think yes, they can get 13 wins. The schedule in the division getting better is it's going to be a treacherous, it's going to be a hard road. And I know you can say that every year, but it's going to take some luck. You got to win the division. You got to get in, and you just have to play your best ball, put your best foot forward, and hope that luck swings the other way a little bit, and not as many injuries this year. And you can. I know this team for the last 3 years has had the capability of winning the whole thing, and nothing's changed going into this season.
I'm going to agree with you guys and try not to repeat everything that you just said, because I think that, you're pretty much right on track with what I think too. But, so the big question mark going into the season is, I think, we lose Tremaine Edmonds and Leslie Frazier. Now McDermott's calling the plays. What's going on in the middle of the defense? Last year it was Ken Dorsey in his first year as a play caller. Now he's got a full year under his belt. He's going into year 2. The offense has demonstrably upgraded, with signing Hardy, losing McKenzie, the 2 guards that you brought in. yes, right tackle is a little bit of a question if Spencer Brown can stay healthy and continue to improve. But, overall, it's like I feel really, really good going into this season again. And I think that it's more of what I love about this regime is they've got a plan for sustaining success. They've built a culture. They're bringing guys back on deals that are team friendly, that don't break the bank. It's just really, really great time to be a Bills fan. So I think everyone should feel really good, regardless of who they draft.
I just want to elaborate a little bit on your point, Chris, here before we get out of here. Sort of to where this roster is, I actually don't know how much they upgraded on offense or not. I think any warm body might be an upgrade over Roger Saffold, so that's not super hard to do. So hopefully that is an upgrade that we think it is. In terms of the other ones, I do project on paper for some of them to appear to be upgrades, but we won't know on some of that. I'm excited about some of those guys, but I don't know that they needed to upgrade a ton in personnel outside of the offensive line. I think the upgrades for me, the biggest ones that I wanted to see, even outside of the draft, even outside of free agency, even outside of trading for DeAndre Hopkins, the biggest things I want to see this offseason that I think the Bills need to get them over the top is changes in some of the things that the coaching staff is doing. And you said it, Ken Dorsey being 1 year in, did he learn? Sean McDermott talked about his ability to self-scout and the problems he saw and the things they did well. We're going to find out. A lot's been called out. Stephon Diggs essentially called out Ken Dorsey in the play calling. We've heard it. We've heard that he's going to correct that. So we'll see. We'll assume. I'm hoping that's the case because we talk a lot about bringing in Hopkins, bringing in these playmakers in the draft. I'm still a firm believer they got all the guys they need in the building. It's utilization of those players. So can the coaching staff grow there? And then we talk about the defensive side of the ball. I think what happened in that Bengals game and the reason the Bills just got pushed around, outside of not having Daquan Jones healthy, I think that was a big part of it, personnel-wise. But I think Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier overcoached that defense to where they weren't playing fast. They were trying to present perfect zone coverages to make Burrow throw into tight windows, and Burrow just sat back and picked them apart. And I don't think they just let the players be the players. So I think that's another change I'm looking to see is in those big moments. We heard Kyer talking in the embedded video last night saying he's better when he's playing fast. And I think all players agree with that. I think Jordan Poyer would agree with that. Mike Hyde. In those big moments, let your key players. You've built up a defense full of talent. To Thomas's point, you have all pros and Pro Bowlers at every level of your team. Go let them make plays. And so I think Coach McDermott and Coach Dorsey are the biggest stories of this offseason and is what is going to be getting the Bills over the hump. I don't think it'll be a personnel decision. They got all the guys they need. It's fun to add. I'm all for adding, but whether or not this coaching staff does those things to get them over the top, that's what I'm looking for this year. All right.
Aaron, I want to jump in real quick. Yeah, just real quick. Two things. One, if anybody didn't catch the show last night, Buffalo Late Night, which I am new to cover one as of a couple weeks ago, but it's every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Check out last night's episode with Z-Bot and Bruce Nolan. I think it was a banger. Went about almost 2 hours. I'm pretty tired today, actually, but it was a great mock draft. We really went and we were in Brandon Beane's head in terms of what we thought he would do, not, from the heart. And then the other thing is, guys, this coming week, we have some big stuff on Cover One. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, we do have coverage that we're going to be every single day doing draft coverage. First night, we have the Bills guys, Mathis and Tilt. They're going to be running the day one of the draft starting at 8 p.m. Day two is Anthony Proska, disguise coverage, starting at 7 p.m. doing rounds 2 and 3. And then day three from rounds 4 to 7 at noon. You got Going Deep podcast, which is Kevin Masari and Mike Bunt. Bunch of guest appearances from people, every single day. But check that out. Should be good. React alongside of us. It should be a ton of fun.
And then Tuesday night, Kevin and Mike and I will be doing a live mock on the Going Deep podcast. So that will be before and then Friday night, next Friday as well, we'll be going live before round 2 to just talk prospects that are left. And what the Bills can do in round 2. Maybe they'll trade back. Maybe they haven't even picked yet. Maybe they added Zay Flowers or Jordan Addison. So we'll talk about that and talk about what they can do in round 2.
Are you not entertained? We got so much stuff.
I know.
Right. All right, fellas, I'm going to get running here. I hope everybody has a fantastic weekend, and it's the draft next week. It'll be Mock City, and then we are all done, and we get to talk about who the Bills get. So exciting times. I hope everyone has a fantastic weekend, enjoys all the content from all the hardworking folks here at Cover One. We appreciate each and every one of you, and go Bills.
Go Bills.